My name is Chris Townsend. I'm the Marketing Director here at Imaginatik, and it's my pleasure to invite you into our topic today, How to Lead a Culture of Innovation, Lessons from the Masters. Before we get into the actual broadcast, I'd like to let everyone know off the top, we will have copies of the slides and a recording of this presentation available for you after the broadcast today. So everyone who's on the line, you can expect an email with information about the right way to access those resources. Before we begin the topic, I'm going to give a little bit of background about Imaginatik for those of you who don't know us. We have worked for more than 15 years with some of the largest, most respected companies around the world, in all cases helping them build their innovation competence, and in many cases helping them solve major problems along the way. We've learned a lot over those 15 years, and one of those things we've learned is that producing real, tangible results is the best way to create momentum and inertia for your innovation efforts. So one big piece of our work is enabling real breakthrough transformational results on whatever it is that faces your business as a challenge. So that could be creating new products to generate new growth and revenue. It could be finding ways to increase efficiency and unlock new synergies across the organization, maybe create better engagement and productivity within the company, and to explore completely new markets and new directions towards major growth for the business. In addition to working on specific projects and unlocking specific results, we work with clients over the long term to build a sustainable innovation culture within the organization. So that means taking each piece of results in discrete engagements and initiatives for innovation and starting to turn that into a constant discipline with the right kind of cultural tools, training people on skills and process and habits and mindsets, building a habit of innovation leadership, which is distinct from what you think of as typical leadership, and we're going to talk a lot more about that today in particular, and understanding that there is a core process for innovation which is complementary to normal business processes but can be learned and repeated and used consistently and successfully to drive innovation in all parts of your organization. And underneath all of this is a software platform that you can use to drive that process again and again and again and roll it out to more and more people to get better and bigger results over time. When we work with clients, we think about building that innovation competence in three buckets. First, charting your course for innovation, figuring out where you as an organization can start, and establishing some of those norms that will drive your success over time. Actually working on new ideas and breakthroughs to actually create those tangible results, build that process, and actually go through different initiatives over time. And then cementing the discipline as you go along by reinforcing skills, getting people trained on best practices, becoming more and more comfortable with group creativity, collaboration in different forms, and really tying together the whole discipline across the company. That's a little bit about what we do. If you'd like to learn more, you can contact us afterwards. Today, I'd like to introduce Bill Truettner. He's been with Imaginatik for more than 4 years now, working on exactly these kinds of topics with our clients. He has a 25-year career as a marketer of various kinds, a lot of it in product marketing and product innovation. A lot of that was spent at Hewlett and Packard, where he was involved in actually running their ideas program and driving innovation at Hewlett and Packard. And he's been innovating for quite some time. So I'm going to turn it over now to Bill. I would like to let you all know that as we go along, you're free to ask questions whenever you like. You can type those questions into the questions bar in the GoToWebinar panel. We will have one break during the presentation. We'll stop to answer any questions we've received thus far, so I encourage you to type those in. And without further ado, Bill, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Chris, and welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day. What I'll be covering today, and do we have the slides showing, Chris?
I'm just transferring viewing to you.
Great. Excellent. Well, what I'll be walking through today is really a fantastic story and something that we all can learn from. I know I learned from in my time at HP, and I'm happy to share and pass along to you. And really the topic is culture is the hardest thing, and all of us want to be part of and want to lead a culture of innovation. But most of us would agree, either based on studies that have been done or our own personal experiences, that leading a culture of innovation is a very difficult thing. My premise is that it comes down to one simple thought, and that is it's all about the people. And that's what Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, as the founders, focused on when they started the company in 1938, and when they started to be less active in 1978. So for 40 years, they took this company from two guys experimenting with technology in a garage to a $40 billion company, which is a manifestation of the success. What I'd like to focus on today is what was that like? What exactly is it that Bill and Dave, as they were commonly known, which is actually a secret to their success, is that they didn't present themselves as formal or official. They presented themselves as friends, working with friends, doing interesting things with technology for the benefit of humanity. And it really was just that simple. But what we'll look at today is, so exactly, let's look at their management philosophy and why it was so effective and how it was that they built such an innovative culture. To me, it comes down to 5 or 6 essential things. Here you can see a picture of Bill and Dave in the labs at HP working with technology. But this concept of how do you cultivate an innovative working environment came down to being very good at setting vision, of course, because that's what leadership has to do, but also giving guidance and support. And right there is an element of philosophy of management that tells us a lot about how they grew the company and how they approached working with everybody else across the company. There is one of the famous phrases that comes out of HP and what came to be known as the HP way is top management sets the objectives and then gets out of the way and lets the people do it. And I would take it one step further. It's really not just sort of letting loose everyone to do whatever they want. It's really about giving guidance and support and setting a positive tone and working in a hands-on fashion around problem solving, and more than anything else, trusting the individuals that you have hired to do the job that they ambitiously want to do. And that really is an encapsulation of their management philosophy. So what is this thing called the HP way? And it's really summed up nicely here by Peter Burrows out of Business Week. An egalitarian, decentralized system that came to be known as the HP way. The essence of the idea, radical at the time, back to 1930s and 40s, was that the employee's brain power was the company's most important resource. And I think that really is the essence of how they approach things. Another famous story, and I'll hope to pass along a lot of the stories that are legendary in HP's history and some of the things that I experienced, is one of the famous stories is that David Packard was meeting with a group of his colleagues, co-company owners and executive CEOs. And the question on the table among the group was, what is the company's responsibility? To whom is the company responsible? And the resounding answer around the room was shareholders. Shareholders, the people, the investors who own and invest in the company. And as that conversation progressed, Dave Packard stood up and said, respectfully disagreeing with all my colleagues, I don't think that's correct. We have a responsibility to our employees, we have a responsibility to the communities that we serve, and we have a responsibility to humanity at large, if you will. And at that time, as the story goes, and I hope I'm representing this correctly, it was not a popular concept, this concept of expanding beyond your stakeholders and the responsibility being beyond your stakeholders. And so that was met with some laughing in the room, if you will. But this is what Dave Packard stood for and stuck to, along with Bill Hewlett as they managed the company. And as we explore what that really means when you say the employee's brain power was the company's most important resource, I think you'll hopefully get an understanding of what it was like to be in that environment, what it was like to be part of HP. So now we look at, there actually became codified and documented what was informally known originally as the HP way. And I'm going to walk through some of those principles, walk through some of those tenets, and pass along some stories that illustrate what they really mean in practice. And hopefully you find some of these useful in your own circumstances as leaders of innovation. And it all starts with, this is about people, and building an innovative culture is about, starts with having trust and respect for the fundamental dignity of the individual. Everything else in the hierarchy, everything else that became the management philosophy and became known and practiced as the HP way is built off that foundation. And if you think about it, it's a really interesting philosophical stance. So you look for good people, you hire good people, and you certainly set performance objectives and you monitor and measure how things are going and you improve along the way. But every situation, every construct in the organization is around this concept that let the people do the job that you're asking them to do. They have the expertise, give them the authority, empower them to do the decision making. So there's a story about Chuck House, who was a manager in HP and was instrumental in one of their business units doing new product development. And one of Chuck's newer products, which was a video monitor that would help visualize what was going on inside a computer system, was previewed with Dave Packard in a review meeting. And this product was in the early stages of research and development, so it was in the lab. And Dave really thought it was not going to be a winning product. And so he said to Chuck, you know, Chuck, I really don't think this is on track. And in fact, he became a little bit verbal about it. And he said, I never want to see this product in your lab again. Well, we fast forward a little bit, and as the story goes, the next review with Dave came around, and Chuck was talking about the same product. And Dave saw the product, and he became incensed, and he said, Chuck, I thought I told you I never want to see that product in the lab. And Chuck said, well, respectfully, sir, it's not in the lab, it's in production, and we're already selling a number of units. So it's a fascinating story of someone who's been given the trust and given the responsibility to be successful in the best way that they knew how, stood by his guns, just like Dave had stood by his guns with his colleagues, and pursued what he thought was going to be a winning concept. It turns out that product sold 17,000 units, which was a lot, way above forecast. And now comes the interesting question. So we're talking about management, we're talking about people. How is it that you create a culture of innovation? A lot of it comes down to how you as a manager react to the circumstances in the moment. So now Dave had been challenged by Chuck House, and the way he reacted was to say, you know what, Chuck, you're absolutely right. He was absolutely willing to admit that he was right, and furthermore, he took it another step. He issued a certificate of bravery to Chuck, and this became one of the legendary stories around the company. So is it any mystery that that kind of a management response to a given situation can start to create a very vibrant culture of innovation? Because in one fell swoop, you've just done what everybody's trying to do with culture of innovation. You have made risk okay. You have made it a safe place to innovate. You have respected decision making and respected the ability of everyone who's involved in the organization. And furthermore, you've said to everybody in a formal way, Chuck didn't get in trouble. In fact, Chuck was commended for his bravery and for moving the company forward. And so these are the kinds of things that, as you focus on culture, we can think about sending a message to the community and making it okay to be innovative. A second tenet of the HP way is focusing on a high level of achievement and contribution. So intuitively you may say, okay, well, if we trust and respect everyone and we have an open and empowered environment for innovation, does that mean that we just have random chaos going on all the time and nothing really ever gets done and the company doesn't ever move forward? Well, of course it doesn't, and this is a multidimensional management philosophy and strategy. So in addition to trusting and respecting people, you also have to say that we have an objective here at the company, and that is to deliver a high level of achievement in terms of our business performance and our goals, and also to deliver a contribution. I think this is the interesting part when you juxtapose those against each other. The achievement is all about everyone being a leader, everyone being enthusiastic, everyone responding and excelling against customer needs, and everyone achieving against the vision and the performance goals that upper management has set. And how do you do that? So how do you go about it? Yes, it's a free, open environment where we trust and respect you to be innovative and do the right thing. But it's also, you've got to have some element of accountability. And what Bill and Dave put into place was another saying that became famous around, what gets measured gets done. So yes, we want you to be open and innovative, but we also want you to be focused on what are the right things to be doing for the organization. And we want to measure progress as we go. We're also going to put into place cascading strategic plans. So from the CEO down to the next level of management, all the way down to the individual contributor at the lowest level, there is a set of strategic initiatives that we are working against. And because they're cascaded and everyone sees them tied together, this is another way to drive the organization to work together to achieve the goals in a common fashion. Everyone understands the strategy, everyone understands how it's tied to the overall strategy, what they're contributing to. So as an individual contributor, you know how the work you're doing is benefiting the company all the way up through the chain. And that creates an environment of I'm empowered and I can contribute in the achievement and make a personal contribution to the success of the organization, as well as our customers and the community at large. There's another technique that Bill and Dave put into place, which was not managing from afar, from on the pedestal, just looking at numbers and trying to understand, are we performing and are we not, and making corrective actions, but really going out into the environment and sitting with people as they're doing their work, this concept of management by wandering around. And the point of doing that was to say, not only everyone working here at HP, you're appreciated for your work, but also let me demonstrate for you the encouraging and positive approach that we take to problem solving. So management by wandering around was a way of showing, tell me what you're working on and tell me where you need help. And maybe I can help you, or maybe I can take some barriers out of the way, or maybe I can support you. And again, it's the role of management to set the objectives, get out of the way, and then support people whatever they need to overcome the roadblocks and the barriers that they're coming up against. So management by wandering around was a way of making that happen, and something that you might already be employing or could employ in your organization. And then furthermore, to focus on achievement and contribution, there's this concept of risk and learning. So we all know that part of innovation is making it safe to take risks. The important part of that equation, though, is not to take risks and just say, well, that didn't work, let's try something else. To take risks and say, that worked or that didn't work for whatever reason, but let us make sure to understand exactly why it did or didn't work. So there was this real strong focus on learning from all the activities that the organization was undertaking, and at the individual level, at the group level, all the way up to the top, making sure that we were learning from our successes and we're learning from our failures. So it's that constant environment of constant learning, and that's how you grow and become better, and a fundamental pillar of an innovative culture. And last is this element of community responsibility. There's a story I like about this. You could say, okay, the company's getting bigger, things are changing. We really can't afford to be doing a lot of contribution to our community around us, either the local cities that we work in or the states or the countries. When HP did not take that approach, they approached this from the perspective of the more good we can do for the community, not only do we have a responsibility, but it is good for our employees and it's good for our business. So if, like a lot of people are, if I'm a parent and I have children in school, and HP is going to support me to put computers in that school, not only does it benefit the school, if you think about that experience as an employee, now you get to be the hero with your children, with the school, with the community. You get to be recognized, and HP gets to be recognized as a company that cares and is making a contribution. And it engenders this attitude and belief among the employee community that, I'm doing something that makes a difference. I'm not just going to work and collecting a paycheck every day. I'm working all these exciting advanced new technologies, and I'm getting to put them in place in my local community and make a difference in the world. What does that do for employee retention? What does that do for an innovative culture? Specifically, what that does is it energizes and engages the employee to be committed to the organization. They truly believe in the company, and therefore they're not just coming to work every day, putting the quarter in the slot, doing the actions that they are being paid to do. They're actually thinking on a daily basis about ways to improve things and ways to make things better. And that's truly exciting from an innovation culture perspective. That's what everybody wants. Everybody wants employees that are that committed and that engaged, and driving and engaging with the community is one of the ways that HP made that happen. So here we've got a pause. Chris, I think we're going to open up to some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So we have a set of questions already that have been coming in. Thank you, all of you, for submitting. I'm going to start with one from early on in the presentation about the leadership philosophy and vision. So Bill and Dave were good friends, and early on in the company, obviously, it was pretty close-knit. There are not a lot of people. As they grow that culture, how do they manage the tension between being friends and actually making really tough decisions as leaders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. And there a lot of times there's no right answer. It's situational, but I think being effective as leaders, friendship doesn't necessarily imply that there's no responsibility or no accountability. Even friends on a personal level, on a casual basis, have a level of commitment and responsibility to each other. So what Bill and Dave did was they said, we can still be friends and we can make smart decisions and face our challenges together. And together we'll see how we're performing, and together we'll figure out how to perform better or how to overcome failures in performance. And there were consequences. It's not like, you could never get in trouble or there were never consequences. But they had this as part of the magic or the art of management that they practiced so deftly, was they had this ability to retain the friendship and retain this we're all in it together spirit while also dealing with tough, hard issues and tough selections. And a good example of that was the furlough program that employees undertook when the company did run up against hard times. And Bill and Dave basically opened up and said, we can't make it with our current employee load, given the way the economy is going and given the way our business is going. What can we do about that? And the employees actually stepped up and took a voluntary work furlough. They were so happy with their jobs. They were so engaged. This was such a terrific working environment that they would forego 1/5 of their paycheck for X number of weeks so that the companies could survive and they could continue on with their mission. In a related story, Wozniak, who went on to found Apple, actually tells the story of how he was approached about founding Apple several times and chose to stay with HP the first couple of times because he was so enthused and so engaged with that working environment. So it's actually a good example of how the positivity of friendship and the right attitude and belief around overcoming barriers collectively and together can overcome really, really tough challenges.
Great, thank you. We have several questions about the HP way and how structured or non-structured it was. I guess to summarize, it would be how did the HP way really drive innovation? Was that something that they actually codified and structured in terms of, what that really meant, especially in terms of innovation?
Yeah, you'll see it in some of the more in the material that I'm going to bring along here in the next few slides. Innovation was actually identified specifically as a target for a technology company starting in the 1940s. So it was a clear and explicit strategy and objective of the company. It was no mystery. But I guess the other way it was structurally approached is to set, for example, stretch goals and stretch objectives that required you to step up and be innovative. So you have, in any given metrics for any given business, there would always be, here's what we think we can do, and then here's our stretch goal to go beyond that. And you were always targeted and driving against the stretch goal, and basically good enough wasn't. And that was made very plain, again, all the way through the management and in the way that they drove the company and set their strategies and measured progress.
Now, what about someone that isn't at the level of Bill and Dave at the top of the company? So let's say that at the very top of the company, management isn't pushing this kind of leadership. What can someone underneath the top leadership do to start to drive a more innovative culture?
Yeah, sometimes that's a wonderful question. Sometimes it's as simple as, because a lot of innovation is collaboration, what can I do as an individual to collaborate with my colleagues? I mean, do I want to get into a work environment where it's sort of dog eat dog and everyone's in it for themselves, and I'm going to hoard all the resources and drive all my good ideas myself and not engage anybody else? Or can I contribute by being more collaborative, by being more open with my ideas and my thoughts, and supporting others, and really practicing a lot of the skills? If you think about what we do in creative brainstorming, and we teach people how to be supportive and encouraging, when somebody has an idea and you want to build on that idea, you do exactly that. You build on the idea. You don't necessarily criticize the idea, even though it is important to be critical and not be naive. Those are things individuals can do, just some quick examples off the top of the head, to drive innovation from the bottom up culturally. So the point is valid. It doesn't always come from top down. Everyone has to participate.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, we're going to do one more question now and then save some other ones till the end. How far can you go with accepting and even embracing failure? Can it backfire if you take that too far? What's the balance between failure and achievement?
Yeah, can it backfire if you take it too far? Certainly. One of the controls on that is you're monitoring. You're actively, so part of the management structure was you don't just sort of turn your head, go away for 6 months, and then come back and say, well, how do we do, folks? You're very, very actively engaged in all the activity that's going on. But there again, especially as mid-level and lower-level managers, it's not a controlling or a micromanaged type of an attitude or approach. It's very much a guidance and support and a monitoring. You're doing the very same thing that you're asking the CEO to do. You're setting an objective, you're putting the resources in place, and you're enabling the success to happen. So you are, as a manager, the first thing you learn, you go through HP Management School, is you are an enabler of other people. You're a leader and you're an enabler. So I think that's part of the answer there. Does that address the...
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it sounds like it's really a judgment. There's no hard and fast rules, but you kind of set an expectation and model that over time.
Yeah, and I think that, how do you prevent really bad things from happening? I think you would see it soon enough. As a project progresses, usually there's time, if you're watching closely, to anticipate it going badly or going sideways, and you can make corrections or just decline and reset altogether. Just redirect the project or stop it altogether. Now, that said, we're all human beings. Things happen. So the other piece of this is you need to recover from something quickly if it does go badly, and part of that may mean something as human as, if it's a customer impact, for example, saying you're sorry, explaining what happened, being very open and honest about it, and taking fast corrective action, as opposed to just saying, well, we did wrong and moving on and not addressing it.
Great. There are some more questions, but we're going to hold these until later, just in the interest of time. So keep those questions coming. We'll answer them towards the end. Bill, why don't you go ahead?
Excellent. So we'll move on to another tenet of the HP way, which is, we've already started talking about a little bit, which is we achieve our common objectives through teamwork. Again, teamwork is widely understood as a critical tenet of innovation. But look at the way it's written. We recognize that it is only through effective cooperation within and among organizations that we can achieve our goals. Now, take that into account along with their decentralized management philosophy. So there was a lot of autonomy among the HP business units, and yet there was this call to action around teamwork, around putting together the innovative philosophy that we need to work together. So again, how do you make that happen? So one of the things they put into place was in the formal management structures for individuals as their performance was being assessed. And this was true for managers as well as individuals. The way that it was decided, the level of compensation that you might receive and the advancement that you might get into different jobs was, I don't know if it was 50-50, but it was really as much about how you went about your work and not just what you produced. So what does that do? What does that say when every 6 months, every individual in the organization is going through a performance review, and the conversation is not just about, did you produce the things you were supposed to produce in the last 6 months? It's about, well, how did you work with the engineering team when you were doing that? Or, you know, how did you engage with customers as you were supporting them? And it's how you collaborated, how you went about your work that became part of how you were judged in the organization. Very effective at driving cooperation, driving teamwork. Some of the other things that seem trivial, possibly on the face, but are tremendously effective is how people work with and relate to each other. If Chris has an idea, and I know it's Chris's idea, but I want to represent it in a meeting and Chris is not present, I should really attribute that idea to Chris. Now, what does that say to everyone in that meeting? If over and over again, day after day, in all the meetings and all your interactions you go to, on a regular basis, people are attributing ideas to the people that generated the ideas. It's a great way to give the credit, if you will, back to the person who deserves it, and to cooperate and to say, you know, we're all in this together. The same concept as building on an idea when you're in a creative thinking session. Another thing you would hear around HP is, you know, less of, well, good luck with that, or, wow, that's challenging, how are you going to do that? And more of, geez, that's interesting, how can I help? You know, and maybe there was nothing you could do, but it was, again, it was an attitude, it was a belief. Culture is fundamentally the attitudes and the beliefs that people are exercising on a daily basis. How different is it in the organization when people are saying, how can I help, versus, well, good luck with that, or even worse, I hope you don't succeed, because if you don't, then it's going to make me look better. There's also this, what it was actually every company is challenged with, and is one of the critical keys to every company's success, this focus on the customer and focus on the competition. So it's kind of this attitude or belief that the enemy's out there, or the challenge is out there. You know, let's pull together, let's cooperate together to deliver more to the customer and to exceed what our competitors can do more quickly. That was a fundamental aspect of the DNA at HP, and something that, you know, along with everything else I've been talking about, it really becomes irascible. It's just, you couldn't kill it if you wanted to. And people spend their time thinking about focusing on the customer and focusing on the competition. Now, this even went to the, I wouldn't say extreme, but, you know, depending on how you view this investment, at one point in HP, while I was working there were 90 people focused on customer experience and the discipline of customer experience. And how is it that you break apart the customer experience and deliver to the experience and get everybody in the organization focused on the customer experience and excelling and delivering extremely high value to the customer. So whether or not that was the right investment to make, you know, you can have your own opinion about, but the point is, as the DNA was re-energized in HP over and over and over again through the generations and through the decades, and as it was passed along from employee to employee, this was part of the passion and the energy around the customer, around the competition. It's the same sort of thing you see at Southwest, for example, with their sense of humor and their focus on the customer. And then the last item I'll mention here around teamwork is this thing called a RACI model, which I don't think was necessarily specific to HP, but it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And this is one that I'm very opinionated about. People need to know how to work together. It could be 2 people, it could be 5, it could be 170,000. But they need to know who's doing what and who's responsible for what. And this RACI model is a formal structure in response to somebody's question a little bit earlier. So what are the structural pieces that you can put in place that will drive innovation? What the RACI model does was it makes very clear to everybody who is responsible for what, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. And now we know how to work together more quickly, more effectively. So we're leveraging our own knowledge, and we're leveraging our brain power. And that is innovation. That is taking what we know and all of our expertise and taking full advantage of our resources because we know how to work with each other. Okay, I'll move on here to another dimension of the HP way, which is something that I ran into when I first went there, and I really like this story. You know, one of the dimensions of an innovative culture is that it should be self-administering. It should be self-policing, self-managing. You know, a culture can't be something that's mandated top-down, where you say, well, you must behave in the following way, or you must believe the following things. So go back to Bill and Dave. What did they do? They created this dynamic where when you were working on problem solving, which is effectively pretty much all the time, there are different ways to go about that. And what we know about human beings is that it's important to be critical and to understand the reasons why there's a problem and to clearly be able to articulate them and understand them. But it's more important to be able to then transition into a positive problem-solving mindset so you can figure out what to do about the problem. This is the essence of moving the company forward, and being innovative is problem-solving. So on one of my first days at HP, I was in a meeting with my colleagues. There were no managers there. There were no supervisors there. There was nobody monitoring and overseeing per se. And we were working on a given outbound marketing issue in that case. And I made a fairly critical observation. I commented to the team. And the conversation stopped. And the room went quiet. And everyone looked at me and just sort of waited. And of course, I was completely embarrassed and wondered what was going on. And I said, well, I'm sorry, did I say the wrong thing? Was that off track? Was that too negative? And they said, no, actually, your comment was right on. And it's okay to be critical, but here at HP, we always expect someone to follow a critical comment with a constructive comment. So we're waiting for your ideas about how might you resolve the problem, or you've articulated part of the problem effectively, what can we do about it? And I thought that was, as part of my, we talk about culture and a self-perpetuating culture. This was part of my initiation into the company. And from there forward, I always practiced, and everyone around the company always practiced this focus on positive and the ability to be critical and look at things critically, but come up with solutions at the same time. So not only does that illustrate a self-managing culture, but it also illustrates this contagious aspect of positivity. And again, it's not something you can enforce. It's something that has to be demonstrated by the behaviors, starting with Bill and Dave, 2 friends working in the garage, supporting each other, trying to figure out how to use new technologies to solve problems. And it carries forward over decades in the company. And then the last tenet I'll talk about here with the HP way is this concept of flexibility and innovation. So here is where I talked about earlier. Someone asked, well, how do you put innovation structurally into the organization? So it was called out explicitly. Flexibility and innovation are together. Flexibility kind of manifests in this concept of inclusivity, that everyone is involved, that we appreciate and truly respect and carefully listen to different styles that people have and different comments that they make, because innovation comes from the collisions of different perspectives and different thought patterns. So when you were trained by observing how others behaved in the organization, that when somebody was saying something that seemed a little off track or was challenging an orthodoxy or was a different way of thinking, that the thing to do with that was not ignore it or immediately believe that that person's wrong or that what they were saying had no value. The thing to do was to appreciate what they might be saying and see if you could understand it and apply it to the situation. And make it welcome, make it safe, that people can have comments and different thoughts from different perspectives, and that is how we get to the problem solving and the breakthroughs and the creative thinking and the innovation that we need to continually move the company forward. When that's happening again, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, across the work environment, this is the power of an innovative culture. There's another dimension of this that Bill and Dave actively supported, and they wanted to make sure was called out as a tenet of the HPOA, and that's the concept of learning and mentoring others. And they really invested in helping employees become better at what they were doing or learn new ways of doing things and stay current with new technologies and new things that were evolving, so that you can apply those new learnings to doing things more effectively for the customers. So that's the HPOA from a management perspective. And I really, if you go back to the initial premise of this whole story, is that the management philosophy is timeless. The management philosophy is effective. It is focused on people. There are other dimensions of culture, certainly, around process and strategy and other components that need to be paid attention to. But the brilliance and the genius of Bill and Dave and what we learned from them, and the essence of culture and getting people to work together collaboratively and be innovative is all about these things that we've learned. What that does when they exercise management strategy that way, and the way I reacted, and I think the way that a lot of employees reacted, and what we learned from that management philosophy, just to give you that perspective, is that my contribution is important, but it's the whole contribution, it's the whole exercise of everyone working together that really matters. It's that, I guess I really do have time to learn, and even though I'm pressed with all my deliverables and my short-term numbers and everything I got to do, as long as I keep the people that I'm working with aware of my circumstances, they're going to understand that I have to have time to learn and have to have the ability to innovate. It's focusing on the outcome, it's staying positive, and really more than anything, it's trust and collaboration. So the same trust that Bill and Dave demonstrated with each other, the same collaboration that they demonstrated and that managers demonstrated amongst each other resonates down through the organization. This is why Wozniak didn't want to leave HP. It's why a lot of people stayed there 35, 40, 50 years, and why it was the best place to work, and why it was the founding institution of the Silicon Valley, that has become widely successful, why so many people left HP and started other companies, carried the culture forward, and you see it in many, many companies today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have learned some things or has reinforced some things that are active in your organization and with yourself that you can apply going forward. And I would encourage you, if you're intrigued and you're really fascinated by this, there is a video on hp.com called Origins that tells these stories even more effectively than I can from the people who were there at the time and were active. And I'd encourage you to go out there and take a look at that, or follow up with any questions. We have another session that we're going to be doing, I guess, via some of the social tools that Chris will tell us about, but we'll move on to questions at this point.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Bill. Great stuff. Just a word before we go into final questions. So Imaginatik does, this is something I showed at the beginning of the hour, Imaginatik does provide some specific support and training around these kinds of principles. So we do work around innovation vision, which you've heard at the beginning, also how to set values and behaviors and to start to create norms that can be repeated and instilled into the culture, and also specific coaching and mentoring around being that kind of innovation leader and how that actually manifests both at a high level and in practice on different projects and efforts. So I would encourage all of you, there are a bunch of specific questions I've seen today about, what are some crunchy ways to start making progress towards this culture of innovation? How do you roll out methodologies and structure and actually train people in a sort of purposeful way? We can certainly get a lot more into that. I think it's a bit more than we can really bite off right now, but I would encourage all of you to follow up, and we'll be happy to talk about that a bit more. And then, as Bill mentioned, next week, exactly 1 week from now, Bill will be live on Twitter to take all questions on this topic that you might have. So we're not going to be able to get to all questions today. There's just too many of them. A lot of them are really good. And we wanted to create a way for the discussion to continue after just the webinar and have it be a little more interactive than we can do in a setting like this. So I encourage you all to log into Twitter next week on Wednesday, and we can certainly answer a lot more questions around this theme. I'm going to turn to some of the specific questions now with the time we have left. Bill, for starters, there was a question a while back about how you measure innovation in something like the HP Way. Can you put any metrics in place? How does that work? How do you know it's working?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the ways you know it's working is there's this whole question of engagement, and it's very common now to see employee engagement surveys or measure the innovation dimension of that survey. So how do people feel? If you ask them specific questions about behaviors and beliefs around innovation, they can give you some feedback on those. That's certainly a measure. From a human perspective, I guess I would just point to that one example. Okay,
good. About innovation and how it relates to the HP Way, was it considered to be primarily a product-oriented thing, how HP thought of innovation, or was it bigger? Could you involve people internally that weren't necessarily customer-facing?
Yeah, that's another great question. I mean, HP is known for products, but and increasingly it's known for a lot more than that. But it wasn't always, and innovation was always embraced across every corner of the organization. It's one of the biggest supply chains in the world, for example. So you don't get that way without being innovative about how you manage your supply chain. It was fundamentally innovative in the way that people were being managed, especially in the early days in that time. But no, it wasn't confined to just products, and you would find it in all parts of the organization, particularly in finance, for example, or in for example, we ran an online innovation challenge for one business unit around efficiency in the supply chain and how many person days could be saved in terms of driving efficiency in that supply chain. Other work went into different business models, and one of the things that maybe isn't as widely known about HP is that the company actually morphed and changed itself 5, 6, 7 times or more over its lifetime. So what that means is you have a variety of business models in the organization, each of which are deployed in an innovative fashion according to the circumstances and appropriately. So there's also that dimension of innovation in terms of being willing to reinvent yourself, reinvent how you're organized, reinvent your business model, reinvent how you manage your money, and how you manage your relationship with customers and partners. It was all active all the time on all fronts.
Excellent. Another question we had is a bit related to the measurements one, but I think it's worth calling out separately. How do you know if the efforts you're making to build an innovative culture are working? Like, how can you, I mean, what is it that are signals of an innovative culture? Like if you're at a very large organization, and you're sitting at the top or sitting somewhere in that organization, how do you know that it's working, what you've been doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the classic measures are true. If you come out with incredibly exciting breakthrough products, like a laser printer, for example, it's working.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely working. If people stick around and enjoy it and love their jobs, and it doesn't take you long to figure out, walking around the environment, if this is a positive and dedicated, committed workforce and people are truly engaged. I remember once, we were in the cube environment, so great big buildings full of cubes. And I remember it was about 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night on a Friday night. And a colleague of mine popped their heads up out of our cubes, and we looked around around the floor, and there were still hundreds of people. And they're on meetings, and they're working, and they're talking. I mean, it was as if it were in the middle of the workday. Sometimes it's just those intangibles where you say, wow, this is a clearly engaged and committed workforce. Now, whether that leads to innovation, or whether that time is all being just sort of frittered or misdirected is a great question. And there you have to look at the tangible outputs and the tangible outcomes, like, are we truly delivering the products that are ahead of the competition? This is another way that the customer lifecycle and the customer experience model came into play. So you can actually break down, as the customer moves through their life cycle, what is the level of experience that they expect from the company, and what are they actually getting? Okay, so if I become aware of a laser printer, what is it that I expect out of that laser printer? If I choose to buy that laser printer, what is it that I expect out of that purchase experience? While I'm using my laser printer, what is it that I expect out of that experience? And you can actually measure, so we're talking about tangible ways of measuring innovation culture. You can actually measure from the customer whether we are meeting, exceeding, or not meeting their expectations at every phase of that customer experience life cycle. And that's a great way to measure whether you're truly being innovative or not, as one example.
Yeah, that's really good. So one of our listeners made the observation that the HP way probably evolved over quite an extensive period of time as the company grew. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to condense down that progress into a shorter period of time for someone that works at a company that maybe already has been around for a while and they want to really change the dynamic?
Yeah, the way to condense it down, I mean, it's certainly Bill and Dave went through a lot of learning from when they first started to where this actually got known as the HP way. They had to be innovative and learn and be as they went along. But the way you do that for your organization is you have to map where are you already competent in the various practices of disciplines of innovation, and where do you need to improve. So you map yourself against a maturity grid, for example, and say, well, it looks like our people management is world class, but there's some process things that we're not as good as we should be. Maybe we should go learn from the experts to learn the latest manufacturing processes, for example, because we're okay, we can manufacture the things we need to manufacture, but could we be highly, much more innovative and much better at what we manufacture? So I think that's the way you do it quickly is you identify the critical areas for improvement that are going to be most meaningful to achieve your organization's objectives, right? Because your survey may come back and say, well, you're really behind in this area. And it's important to look at that rationally and say, okay, we're behind in manufacturing, but that's okay. Our business strategy says we are never going to be, for best in class in manufacturing. And rather than try to be more innovative there, we're going to redirect our attention to being better at our channels, our go-to-market channels. And that's where we're going to really, truly make our innovative breakthroughs. That aligns with our business model, that aligns with our business strategy, and that's something you can identify quickly how to improve your innovation competence in that area. What is harder to do is to spread that energy across multiple competencies of innovation and try to do it all at once. You're better off to focus on one.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we're going to take one more question now and then save the rest for Twitter next week. What about reward and recognition? So you talked a bit about informal recognition, let's say. Is there anything more formal that HP did or a company that's emulating the HP way might do?
Well, for those of you who know HP, this is a softball question because they were one of the first companies to put profit sharing into place. They were one of the first companies to actually in the early days, get all employees together and personally hand out paychecks at the end of every pay period. They were one of the first companies, and that's all important. there are tangible ways of rewarding, and the sort of the extrinsic approach to motivating people, and those are critically important. People are working to earn a living. They have families. They have careers. They have goals. They have things they're trying to do. But it was always sort of secondary to, and I think we know this about people, the intrinsic motivations, and what they were so good at doing was recognizing. I recall personally, I got to present, for example, to the head of the whole printing business, a project I was working on. Now, where that took me as an individual in terms of being engaged and motivated and feeling recognized for my efforts and for my work was so much further than I could have gone with any tangible reward. So there was a balance, but it was something that they paid a lot of attention to.
Okay, great. Bill, I want to thank you again for a great presentation. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. We will have the recording and the slides available very shortly. Expect an email coming around about that. And please do join us next Wednesday for our Innovators Corner on this same topic.